Some voices from history, they just don't fade away. Today, we're going to dive into one of those stories, the American Founding Fathers. We're talking about a group of rebels and thinkers who tried to pull off something that honestly should have been completely impossible. I mean, just stop and think about the sheer audacity of it. The world back then, it was all kings and empires. Power was inherited. And these guys, they dared to imagine a nation built on something totally different. Not on bloodlines, not on who your father was, but purely on an idea. So, where does an idea that radical even come from? Well, to get it, you've got to understand the world they were up against. Okay, so picture this, the 18th century. This wasn't some age of disruption and startups. Nope. Power was locked down. You had massive empires spanning the entire globe. So the idea, the thought that a few small colonies could just break away and govern themselves, it wasn't just unlikely, it was basically unthinkable. And smack dab in the middle of all this, you've got these 13 colonies. They're thousands of miles away from their rulers, way across the Atlantic Ocean. They're living completely under the shadow of the British Empire. We're talking a global superpower here. And that right there, that's the central problem, isn't it? It's really the core question of this whole story. If you don't have a king, if you don't have a built-in aristocracy, how in the world do you build a nation from scratch? Based on what? An idea? Well, that theoretical question was about to get very real very fast. Because as tensions with Britain started to boil over, that abstract idea of self-governance, it stopped being a nice thought and became the only path forward. And that path, it led straight to conflict. It really was like a chain reaction. See, it didn't just start with a call for war. It started with stuff that felt unfair, practical things. Taxes going up without anyone having a say. And when that happens, people start asking bigger questions, like, what about our rights? And in these crowded town halls and rooms lit by candlelight, those questions got hammered into powerful, world-changing ideas. And pretty soon, those ideas turned into demands they weren't backing down from. And let's be clear, this wasn't just one person's project. It was a whole chorus of voices. You had thinkers, writers, soldiers, statesmen, all of them. And believe me, they argued a lot. They debated fiercely. But they were all united by this one singular, incredibly powerful vision: freedom. And in 1776, that vision finally found its voice. This wasn't some polite memo sent off to the king. No way. This was a declaration to the entire world. It was the moment they drew a line in the sand. And after that, nothing would ever be the same. So what made it so revolutionary? Let's break it down. It laid out these absolutely mind-blowing principles for the time, that we're all created equal, that we have certain rights that nobody, not even a king, can take away. And it was a signal, a loud one, that an entire people was willing to risk it all for those beliefs. Okay, but declaring you're free, that's one thing. Actually winning your freedom, that's a whole different ballgame. Those beautiful words on a piece of paper, they had to be paid for in blood. And that brings us to the brutal reality of the war. Yeah, revolutions are never clean, are they? The war was just brutal. We're talking about winters with mass starvation, battles with unimaginable loss. And yet, somehow, against all odds, that little spark of hope from the Declaration, it just refused to go out. So after years of fighting, they actually did it. They won. But this is where the story hits its true climax. Because winning the war, it turned out, was the easy part. Now came the real challenge. How do you hold on to the freedom you just fought and died for? Yeah, winning the war wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. In fact, it was the beginning of a much, much messier story. All of a sudden, this brand new, fragile union was standing on incredibly shaky ground. And there were no easy answers. Just these huge, fundamental questions. How do you divide up power so you don't just create a new tyrant? Who's in charge? And maybe the biggest one of all, what rights do we have to protect no matter what? Their answer to all of this? The Constitution. And here's the brilliant part. It wasn't brilliant because it was perfect. It was brilliant because of its design. It was never supposed to be some rigid document set in stone. It was a framework, one that was hammered out through tons of compromise and built to last, built to adapt. It created a system where power was balanced and where, for the first time, the voice of the people was supposed to be what mattered most. But that framework and the men who created it, well, they left behind a legacy that is powerful, yes, Influential for sure, but also deeply, deeply complicated. It's a story that is far from finished. And this is where we get to the massive contradiction at the very heart of it all. They spoke of liberty, with words that would echo around the world. But their incredible vision of a world where everyone is free slammed right into the reality of their time. And that reality was a world where many, many people were not free at all. It's in that gap, that huge gap between their amazing ideals and their compromised, flawed actions. That's where you see their humanity, warts and all. And make no mistake, those echoes aren't faint. They're loud. Every single debate we have today, about rights, about the law, about our responsibilities to each other, it all carries the imprint of their choices. Their decisions, the good and the bad, are still shaping our world right now. So maybe the best way to think about the Founding Fathers isn't as these perfect marble statues we put on a pedestal. Maybe it's better to see them for who they really were, people. Active players in a story that was just getting started. A story that absolutely did not end with them. You know, when you really listen to their voices, they aren't asking for blind admiration. They're a reminder that freedom isn't something you just get. It's something you have to constantly pursue. The foundation they built was never meant to just sit there untouched. It was meant to be questioned, to be debated, to be built upon by future generations. It was designed to evolve. And that unfinished story, well, it's our turn now. It's in our hands. So the real question isn't just about what they did back then. It's about what we do now. How is our generation going to continue the story?